and the wind sheds tears as we stand stoic upon the shore, our feet stained by the mud, as the dust whispers into our ears. We shall leave, never to return. There is no God, no creator, no divinity, no deities, no angels, no miracles, no demons, no soul, no heaven, no hell, no icons, no fate, no destiny. Nothing exists above nature, whether it be born from an egg or a womb, whether it has risen from waste or is instantly matured from birth. All things are born and bred, relying on relationships, only to perish as individuals before taking shape once again, be it man, animal, plants, dogs, insects, ashes, vapor, and so on.
Welcome to VER Podcast, and this podcast is part of the exhibition We Will Leave and Never Return, a solo exhibition by Arin Rungjang. The topic today is We Will Leave and Never Return When Fiction Becomes Reality. We are with Zoe Butt and Arin Rungjang, and I am Pearamon, will be the MC of today. Can you two introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Arin Rungjang, and I'm Thai artist, and this is my exhibition, We Will Live and Never Return. And today is my great pleasure that I could have this conversation with my long-term best friend, Zoe Butt from Australia. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zoe Butt. I'm a curator, writer, spent the last 15 years in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City. Running two different artist-inspired organizations, one called Sandheart, the other the Factory Contemporary Art Center. But now living in Chiang Mai, Northern Thailand. So what we've just heard is the beautiful poetry of Arin Rungjang and this very special text that introduces his exhibition, We Will Leave But Never Return. And what's quite inspiring about this special text is that it is a very concise, simple entry into what is actually quite a complex world that Arin is attempting to unpack, which engages to some degree a question of when a fiction becomes our reality. And thus, the title for our podcast today is indeed When Fiction Becomes Our Reality. Inside this special little text of Arin, he talks about the existence of nature and its structures as being beyond the realm of human control, even though we very much attempt to try and control it via our use of words, via our attachment to belief, meaning our religion, which are entirely man-made constructs. When you walk into this exhibition, there's a sense of the universe starting perhaps from zero. That's essentially how it felt for me walking into this exhibition. On the right-hand side, we can sense and smell rather incense. And there's this very large scale piece hanging from the wall. And you may get a little confused in perceiving that this is cement, a solid material, but actually it's composed of incense. And there are careful gold gilded lines throughout this wall work. And it has this feeling for me as if the universe is bubbling. It's just beginning. And then on the left-hand side, there's this stark white wall with indeed another stark white canvas, but with careful thread work in a circle. And it's as if this thread work is this magical set of equations that show how the world is constructed according to its own even rhythm. But it is indeed, as Arin's work indeed in this entire project recalls, cycles of life. And those cycles of life are with a lot of differing perceptions in our contemporary world. Indeed, this sense of cycle is something that has been with humanity since the dawn of our existence. And much of that cycle is through the watching of the elements. And if we reread some of Arin's text, he says there is no God, no creator, no divinity, no deities, no angels, no miracles. Nothing exists above nature. And he also further talks about how content and definition of all things are determined by human semiology in a world where only the domains of man hold any true significance. So one of the things that I wanted to ask Arin is about cycles, because the title of the show, it says, we will leave, but we will never return. But indeed, the work itself is this constant set of cycles that hints that the materials of life do return. So why is it that we enter this with a sense of we're not coming back? What does that mean for you?
So I was talking about the Inertian idea. When I started to make this work, it came from two stories that happened in my life, and both stories based on suffering. The first story was about my father, who has been assaulted in Germany in 1977. The second story was about my sister, who's been suffered from being female, living in this male domination world. And both suffering was how I came up to this idea related to this work, and back to my earlier work when I did 20 years ago. That was also related to my father's incident as well, that my father has been assaulted in Germany. And the question that I put through those work was the stories all words, and the sensation or feeling, which one came first when those group of people considered to attack my father. And it clearly seen that it was the story that came first, the story of racism. So started from that point of view. That's how I came up with this particular work. And response to your question. So the question based on this exhibition is whether it's fiction or reality that affect our suffering. So in the history of, through the history of Thailand and related to the world, through the material and immaterial world. So speak about that immaterial per, as we say, soul, consciousness, or stories. They are all fictional story that no such thing in nature exist. So there's no biological connected to that story. There's no chemical. There's no, nothing is real in that story. But it's all about man created. So we experience thoughts, feelings, and impulse that come from our brains, and we attribute this to the self and to the individual, which is related to cognitive process and recognition patterns that we are created through material symbolism and language, and use it as tools. So basically, story is a tool that humans use to create. So the sense of self or consciousness, they are all fiction. So we then need this sense of consciousness to function as human beings in the world of human domain, right? But the story that happened 1,000 years ago, maybe not relevant to the story nowadays, but it's a tool, right? So in this sense, ourselves as a whole relate to nature, to the universe. That was when we combine that was when we connected our consciousness, our stories to nature, like we play along with nature. So we integrate ourselves, which was not individual yet, to nature as a playground. And in this sense, the whole nature is the whole universe. So in that way, there was not you, no me, right? Until we classify them by language and symbolically created fiction, such as story of deities, gods, and laws, to create the world that we wish to live in. So started from that point, no self was attached to nature, but part of the whole universe became part of the whole story that we created. For example, like story that invented by Hindus society back to more than 2,000 years ago. They produced 330 million gods and goddesses. So in that sense, we are born with self-identity as an individual. Nowadays, in the modern world, we're born with an identity card, a driving license with picture and number. So you cannot use my identity card, my driving license is just only for myself. And since there is no self-exit, we are not born or die. But since we created ourselves, then we do not die and we die. So in both sense, we are die and we are not die. So we compare this to my sister's story. Right? She's been suffering for real under that suppress of male domination world, being unsuccessful marriage, divorces, and put herself into that block of femininity. And so finally she died and been suffering for all her life. And then I found that she created her Facebook and Twitter. She has 2 Facebook accounts. One that she used to connect with the family, to us, and it seems to be very happy. The other Facebook that he created is to connect to those people who are sick with depression. And we understood why she turned herself into that tragedy and died for real. So in this case, you will see that she died and she not died. She died from her suffering. She's not died. She's still existing in that Facebook, her Twitter, herself that she wanted to create within that stories. So that's why I named this exhibition. Title it "We Will Live and Never Return," in the sense of reality, not fiction.
I think what I'm understanding by what you just shared about this, we will leave but never return, is in life, we have the reality that is biological and the reality that we live, which is logical, mental. And there's one biological realm of our materiality which ages, decomposes, and comes back in different forms. But then there's another part of us which is almost like a fiction, which is the identities, the individual that we create as a means of understanding our, what you call becoming in the world. It's is a kind of fiction that we give words to, we give images to. And as you say about your sister, in that, you know, she left almost these other kinds of alter or virtual selves after she passed, so that in, as you say, many ways, she's never gone. There's always traces of her fiction, her identity remaining. And I think that that's a very curious way of engaging the existential question of why are humans on the planet? You know, we spend our lives asking ourselves, why are we here? What's the purpose of our existence? And in that vein, there's been so many attempts to give answer to that. And one of the biggest conduits is through faith. Since the very, very beginning of time, humans have dreamt up a certain kind of, dare I say, fiction, which in many parts of the world today is still contentious. You would never be allowed in Islam to say that Islam is a fiction. But there are certain humanists, the study of humanism, which is to say the study of matter, is that we have certain narratives that we like to draw, and religion is a kind of narrative. It's a sense of space that we've created in order to find our belonging, identify our becoming. And I remember, you know, we've had numerous conversations over the last year, particularly about a particular painting in a particular temple in Bangkok, Wat Boromniwas, which is where a painter called Krua Inkong created this marvelous temple painting in the 1850s under King Rama IV, which is, for me, a complete stunning piece of both technical mastery, but also imagination. This is someone, a monk, who had never traveled to the West. And yet you walk into this temple and you can see George Washington, you can see the White House, and it's all within a Buddhist narrative, which refers to something called the Ramakien, which we will talk a little further on in this podcast. But the experience of this particular painting takes on a whole other worldliness, because at this time, dare I say, correct me if I'm wrong, he's one of the first Thai monk painters to remove the angels and demons, and instead we have a modernizing world pictured as our fiction, as the world of delight. Because typically these mural paintings would paint the world that we wish for, that we long for, we dream about. But here, it's almost like we're looking into a mirror onto the West. And so at the time when this painting was created, which is in the 1850s, colonialism was on the rise across the world. And King Mongmut, King Rama IV, was very aware of this rising urge of the West wanting to colonize his region. And he didn't want to get caught up in this seeming image of not being a modern country. And so he went to great extent to try and give image to how Thailand is indeed modern. And so this monk pictured a Thailand using Western icon. And it's indeed quite a fantastical fiction to put on a wall, which is a space where you give reverence, like it's religion. But in your work, you refer to this space, these marvelous paintings, in a concise video installation. And you see this mural, it's almost being peeled off the wall like a skin. And the skin has been twisted. And it's constantly turning and churning in this video installation. And you can see segments of this mural as it shifts. To me, it looks like a kind of DNA molecule. It's almost like a human cell, and it keeps shifting. Can you explain a little bit about why you treated these paintings in this way? And feel free to add on to any historical significance that I've failed to share.
So to answer your question, there's a process. I mean, this kind of certain itinerary in my work that I came with. So I started with Quencom paintings, and what I'm interested in that painting was about these characters that put on painting, which is all the Westerners appear on that painting. And there's so many people, an academic people who wrote about that story that Quencom was he was a very kind of modern man who tried to use Western techniques and introduce Western civilization throughout his works. But then actually I found when I scanned through the whole painting that there's a tiny part that he left 3 Thai characters. And those 3 Thai characters, 3 Thai person that he painted on this particular painting, it painted in Thai traditional technique. So it's different, totally different from other actors and actresses in that painting. So what interesting for me was about how he thinks of the society at large, and at the same time has to fight with Western civilization to be effective. So in case you wanted to have a very effective society, you need to tell the story that people can grasp, identify easily. So the 2 things that he combined in that painting was to survive from suffering. Imagine about those days during the war, during like after the second Opium War, and we have to compare comparative stories. One in China, one probably what he's invented here in Thailand. The Chinese version of internal change from this Christian or Western civilization happened in China with Taiping Rebellion. So the Taiping Rebellion was the most massacred in Chinese history. Like about 30 million people died during that rebellion. And it was from the leader of the Taiping Rebellion, Huang Xiguan, who reinvented himself and tells people that he's the brother of Jesus Christ. So that totally different strategy from King Ramapo, who's not completely reinvent himself, but combine together with the story from Tai Pitaka, the Buddhist story, and the other is the story of Western civilization, to give the picture or to tell to the people that this story that we going to rely on will give a very effective society and bond people together. So in this case, we need more than a power of manipulation on religion, but also on military as well. And I think for me, I'm not art historian, I'm not historian as well, but to predict from that evidence or traces, we could see the potential of internal change, especially on Thai society, using 2 different methods, one religion, one military, and reinvent ourselves through I don't say a good story, but a very compelling story. You know, in order to protect the land, to protect this very special society, and that's how it turned into this very important point of view that the leader of the country was the one who invented this a very compelling story to lead to a very effective society in the future. And at the same time, beside that, there's a technology and tool on that painting too, but it never give that question on ethical or morality. You know, like the whole society is ready to sacrifice, not sacrifice, but to live their life with that new invention. And because of the introduction from the king is to introduce the new society that would survive from suffering. You know, like if he didn't turn the whole society into that shape, he would maybe turn it into like a battle, and people would die because of gunfire, you know, big ship and cannons and technologies and tools that we will never be able to defeat the Western. In the history, you would see like the Second Opium War is between China, England, France.
Why did you treat the painting in this twisted DNA-like structure? What is the meaning of that structure?
Because nowadays technology and tools turn into more critical, more effective than the story.
I see. So to you, that continuous sense of twisting, turning in on itself is a visualization of how information is processed, how modernization has created certain techniques, tools, as you say, through which we process meaning. But that is in constant motion. It's never ending. And indeed, those tools and techniques are themselves a kind of fiction that has very little actual physical materiality. Is that, yeah?
I mean,
kind of.
to give a little bit less complicated picture, could be like on the battles, you have like two sides, right? And you get battles based on fiction. So giving this kind of story of how the British rule over Tibet, Tibetan people, was the British army armed with like guns and you know like all the technology, while the Tibetan hang the talisman on their chest, and they wish that they could prevent that or defeat the British army because of the talisman would protect them from bullets. But in reality, that bullet penetrates through their chest and they die for real. And the loss of war, of their stories and the British story is irrelevant. And they believe in that story because they believe in the fiction more than truth and technique. So from that point of view, to nowadays, we rely more on techniques and tools as part of how we creating the story as well.
And I think that what you're getting at in the work is that reliance on techniques and tools. Today, we think of technology as virtuality in a big way, like the amount of time that we spend online, the amount of time we invest in our online identities, the amount of time that we rely. I mean, how many of us today truly understand how finance is accrued? It's a virtual kind of transaction. None of us can actually touch it. It's all a series of numbers and algorithms. So these are all kinds of fictions that have, indeed, they are governing us today. But what I think this work of yours is hinting at is that these fictions have had techniques much longer before the virtual. And you present it here in this rather beautiful re-rendering of a painting that is, in a sense, the Ramakien, which is this national story. It's a very religious story in Thailand. And it is also one that represents the king, who, as you say, has been reincarnated in constant fashion. And so here we then find faith, religion, and the fictions that it is twisting being used as a form of political control. So in knowing that we have this relationship between you, your sister, and the identities that still remain, then we have Kro Inkong, who is instructed by King Rama IV to create this narrative. And he wants to leave a little hint of himself with these three figures as a form of resistance. In a way, your sister's death, dare I say, was a form of resistance. Kro Inkong's little three people, a form of resistance. But I think we also need to really unpack for whoever's listening out there that the Ramakien is actually coming from another Hindu epic, and it's itself coming from another part of the world. So we indeed are seeing how stories are appropriated from other times and other spaces, and nothing can be ever considered truly original in a way. And that is something also in this twisting of information that we see today, where it's so easily done to go and craft an identity out of an amalgamation of everything else that exists. So maybe we should share a little bit about how the Ramakien and the imaging of it started to give ideas of Thailand as a nation, informing the principles with which it is run, and how it forms this idea of the divine when we think about the Thai monarchy. And think a little bit more globally about then how we see structures of stories, fictions, ethically controlling us, and that this is actually something that we're seeing also in our online realities. Because I think that's a really interesting relationship when we think about what's happening in Iran, or, you know, how we think about our virtual worlds talking differently about dominant narratives that control us.
Two folktales that turned into a very popular in this region were Ramayana and Mahabharata. But Ramayana was more popular than Mahabharata because it is easy to use that story to manipulate the political situation that happened during that time. Mahabharata is about the battle between siblings. So it was not a good story that fit the political situation. So that I think, and because of it's so entertaining too, people love to watch that Ramayana. I mean, and like
because there's many shadow plays and various forms of theatre across Thailand also that give circulation to this story in Thailand. Yes.
You need a story that people at large could grab easily and identify very easy. You don't need the story that turn or reveal the truth. I mean, like we don't need that. If we need a very effective society, we need the story that can grab people's mind. So Ramayana was.
And do you think that people would have entered this temple in the 1850s or 1860s and would have seen this imaging of a world to dream about as something that is for them? Like, I mean, there were train carriages that he would never have seen, and I think he pulled from postcards. There's pictures of Western ships. Again, he would never have seen it. They're also pulled from various little pieces of print media that he would have seen. So he's drawing out of his imagination. He's drawing out of a circulation of material that's being shared with him, probably from King Rama IV. But as you just said, these are stories that people love. These are stories that people talk about. It's a form of entertainment. So it's a very kind of modernizing, it's a way of modernizing the imagination of Thailand by giving it this picture of it being the world that we aspire towards, right? Because they would have entered this temple and seen these images and been like, wow, because this is technology that they wouldn't have had in their world at that time. Am I right?
Yeah, I think, but he smartly merged them together, like that tools and materials and very futuristic characters and pictures, but based on the Tripitaka story, the story of Buddha, like to read the Nirvana. For example, like one window, he explained that there's a wise man who invented this boat, and the whole world is full of suffering. And to reach the Nirvana, you have to cross this ocean with full of struggle, suffering and suffering. So this wise man created this boat and the ship. The ship would help carry all the people from the land reach to the vanishing point. He even used the vanishing point as the point of nirvana, where the nirvana is. That kind of thing. Yeah.
And that has special significance also in terms of Western painting, when you think about the ability to give dimension to a vanishing point. This idea of the end of the earth, the idea that the bewildering fact that the earth is actually round, and this understanding that space is infinite and repeating, so it's also alluring to think that these paintings of such perspective, because also the perspectival compositional work in this painting is quite unusual compared to other Buddhist paintings of the time. It suggests a very scientific reading of the world. And I think King Rama IV was quite a engineering kind of mind to realize the aspirations of science and technology to a rising populace that have the ability to receive letters from abroad, newspapers from abroad, images from abroad. So there was a need to show that Thailand is aware and participating in this somehow. I think what's also interesting is that these Buddhist worlds are picturing a so-called garden of, dare I recall Hieronymus Bosch in his garden of earthly delights. I mean, Kura Inkong is definitely giving us these earthly delights. They are the technological world. And to show aspiration that the technique of the world is where we place our meaning, our purpose, and not the divine heavens of space and this idea of reincarnation. But I think, you and I have had these conversations where you're trying to reveal that these technologically driven times in which we live were given origin in these moments of religious instrumentalization, right?
Yeah.
Very, very much today we're seeing how once upon a time it was religion that is instrumentalized, but now it's almost technology has become a religion. And it is that gives us our identity, our selfies, our Facebook IDs, our Instagrams. These are where we see so many young people investing more time and energy in trying to use that space as a means of value as opposed to their real selves. I mean, it's quite shocking for me to read of Korean married couples in the metaverse, and they in their metaverse have a child. And in the metaverse, they're very attentive. They will feed that child. But then there was a case where this couple actually had a physical human baby between the two of them, and they failed to feed the physical child, and it died. And then there was this legal court case that was quite shocking to reveal that these two humans cared more for their virtual realities than their actual physical ones. And I mean, that also makes me think about a text called Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram. He talks about the moment when language cut us off from an understanding of nature because our words, which used to be small pictures, those small pictures became abstractions. They became symbols only, with very little visual connection to a plant or a waterfall. And so with that divorce in reading, we no longer really cared about that waterfall or that plant. And that divorce, you could even say, perhaps we could call words, which is semiology, you could call it its own kind of technique, which was perhaps the beginning of a divorce from understanding our actual impact on the world.
Or even the nature becoming a symbol, like now we have things like emojis with really extinct animals, but then in the real life, they're all gone.
Exactly. And we have to ask ourselves, to what extent are we linking our responsibilities between the virtual and the real, our fictional, for the sake of this conversation, the fictional and the real. And in so many circumstances, you could say that the politics of today is milking our attachment to that technological realm, our modernizing world. I mean, we now have drones that can take DNA tests of its targets before it actually explodes. I mean, this form of technology is a whole nother realm of materiality that I don't really think we morally or ethically fully consider the ramifications of. And it's a kind of wonderful, complete rehaul when you think that these conversations of technology began in some circumstances in Thailand with this little temple that attempted to show how divine its king could be in offering progress.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, like, I think because nowadays because of technology that is really make us realize what is the story, what is the reality, what is fiction, what is reality, and because of the technology, otherwise we won't be able to we lost the ability to tell the difference between fiction and reality, like the pattern between Tibetan and the British. So I think the problems, I mean, also that I introduce in my work is to show when people lost the ability to tell the difference between the stories that we invent as tools and reality, and the reality. In this case, that put this earth material thinking to I don't know why it's going to be a good story that fit our human being, because like good stories always to reduce suffering. For example, like this story that King Ramapo created is the story that to tell the whole society that is going to save us from suffering. The British,
Technology saves the day.
And So you see, like, he might learn about the Taiping rebellion that if he completely invented the new Western civilization, the form of Western civilization completely, and relying on, like the figure of Jesus Christ or Christianity, it would not work, and it would end up like what happened in China. So the combination of from Buddhist Theravada together with technology and tools and Western civilization would probably uh, make people grasp that idea easily and and and, and admittedly to let him lead the whole society and survive from those suffering, that kind of thing.
And on that note of trust, when you walk into your exhibition, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's not so much a presence of story, but a presence of real materiality. You can smell the incense. You're walking with your shoes off, so you get a sense of the ground being soft, heavily carpeted. The lights are dim. There's you're confronted by space in a way that it actually made me feel quite calm. I entered and I felt my whole body just kind of drop. It was almost like I was entering what I would want a space of divinity to feel like. And I wonder if was that your point with the first room in the exhibition, is to try and remove the narrative somewhat, try and remove the desire to be constantly fictionalized and really return an anchor to this tactility, this contact with the material? Was that part of the strategy?
Yes, I mean, like that's why I wanted people to take off their shoes and to use their sensations more than their, or the description. And I think that's it. For me, is a process of how we could keep this ability to tell the difference between stories and the reality. Like if we still rely on our sensations and and this is real because we smell is real. We like, and then to show them that because of the within this process that we invest our sensational kind of ability into that story, it's because I cannot blame on why we need to rely too much on a very good story, because we need a very effective society, right? I mean, you cannot put people together now. 7 billion people. No, we touched 8 billion people already. The whole world, and they're all strangers. Like they don't know each other, and they rely on stories to feel
Yes.
and to feel themselves as a human being. And that stories help them connect each other. But at the same time, if they believe in that stories and connect with each other through that story, they will lose that sense of the ability to invest that sensation in the reality, the world reality. A few days ago, the leader of North Korean shows the picture of how he born with his daughter, a very, very, like a fascinating picture, like father and daughter. And they both look at that nuclear weapon trying that launch onto the space. And but in that case, like we know exactly the basic morality of how the North Korea will never surpass that, because if they kill some country, it means that it's the North Korean that killed that country. This is the whole. It is a very global threatening that we realize, and we can also put it onto that the level of ethic and morality. But another threatening, the COVID-19, we have predict that, and we have this a very like a skepticism kind of theory that it would probably from China, Chinese government, or some other people's government, and then it feels it fuzzy, and then this is not to point to one country like Korean, North Korean, but you see on the street in New York, Chinese people got attacked, right? Thai
Yes.
people, even Thai people, because they look like Chinese. I mean, they have no idea because within these 8 billion people that live together in the world, they look similar, Chinese, Thai, Cambodian.
Yes.
Right? But so they cannot point to like which country is the one who made that happen. So this is the problem.
So in a way, your video installation where we see the churning of patrimony, the churning of dominant religions, the churning of a modernizing world. There's I mean, I call it a DNA molecule, but I think we're both seemingly on a similar page where this churning of such technique is at the center of our conception of self. It's at the center of our fictional lives. And thus you're decontextualizing it. You've put that churning on a black background. You've isolated it, you've turned it into a kind of object. And in doing so, I find myself questioning what other parts of history have similarly done the same. And, you know, you've talked in this conversation about China and Tibet. You've mentioned the Opium Wars. I mean, throughout humankind, we have repetitive notions to which we've held on to the dominant stories that we're told, indeed as a very measure of trying to escape suffering, alternative solutions to pain.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so many other kinds of conversations we could have here about the early humanist tradition, which, as you and I have discussed, begins with the thinking of Aristotle, Lucretius, who believes that actually humanity should be pursuing pleasure. The point of life is not to be constantly living a reenactment of suffering as the monotheistic religions of Judaism or Christianity or Islam will have you believe, but that if we were to imagine the pursuit of pleasure, then we would want to nurture what gives us pleasure, which may mean our relationship to the planet may be in a very different state right now, because we're focusing on how to nurture that sense of health, meaning perhaps we would actually have less soil contamination. Perhaps we would have more respect for the amount of water we're consuming and from where it's coming from. Perhaps we'd not be mining so many rare minerals because we're focusing on the need to give sustenance for pleasure instead of constantly reaping and raping the earth because of the pain that we're continuously telling ourselves is just the process of enduring life for that altar space of redemption and reincarnation, right? So I think there's some really lovely strategies of potentialities in this exhibition. Unfortunately, however, I would think that some of those thoughts I've just shared, many would deem highly controversial.
I think many many of people my age will disagree with you, because many of people my age, also someone younger than me, seeks pleasure in their fiction life or as in virtual reality, right?
Interesting.
Sometimes we would buy things like fast fashions, or even we would buy things to wear just to take a picture and post it, and then we would never wear it again because it doesn't make sense anymore. And that feeds. and that feeds to the idea of destroying the planet, or even the Wi-Fi signal that we use to connect to each other virtually also is a means of destroying the planet at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting you raised that notion, because how do we define pleasure?
Right.
Is pleasure to be found only in our immediate instance, or is pleasure actually the sustenance of something long term? And the older I get, the more I take pleasure by the fact I was able to grow a plant from a seed. Or it's understanding that I don't long for a zillion objects in my life, because I've found happiness with a select few. So I think this is all about, and this is what the early humanists were writing about, is that pleasure isn't this insatiable, instantaneous accrual of moments that we endure, but it's a space to which we give respect and understanding from how we gain that pleasure and how we give it back. So I think that one of the things missing from our love of technique, the tools, our technology, is we're so absorbed in that fictional realm, we're utterly removing the physical ramifications of being in love with it.
Yeah, I think like I said before, like the most important is like when the critical point is when we cannot make a distinction or difference between the stories and the fictions and the reality, and to realize that the fiction or the story is the tools that we use it to invent this story.
I would like to thank the two speakers today, Zoe Butt and Arin Rungjang. And the current exhibition, We Will Leave and Never Return, will be on view until 25th of December. We're open Wednesday to Sunday.